Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and I've got some interesting sales today. Some standard mint on cards. I've got both some sealed as well as unused contents 12-inch line figures that were all really nice and sold at auction from the seller Toy Scout that we talk all the time. And he also had some mint in sealed box mini rigs that I wanted to show you that sold at auction. As always, thank you to my Patreon supporters. And on that note, I need to say thank you to Benny Tan. He recently increased his monthly Patreon membership fee, and I really appreciate you doing that, Benny. I hope you're doing well. I see you claiming stuff willy-nilly on Rogue 5 Toys occasionally, so thank you again very much for supporting the channel with an increased Patreon amount. And let's go ahead and dig in. It's not a huge lot that I've got, but because of my work schedule and the lack of items I have in my closed watch list, this is going to be the list because I just don't have too much else to show right now until some other auctions close. So here's one from CIB/AFA. They had a number of obviously very nice high-grade mint on cards that they handled on a commission basis, I assume. And this one had sat for a while. I was wondering if it was going to sell or not. And it finally did sell. This is a 20-back G Walrus Man. Very nice looking example. It's a shame that the rocket-firing Boba Fett offer covers up those ugly testicles that are on Walrus Man's face, but that's what it is. But either way, very nice example. It was a punched example, but no price sticker. Here's the back of the card. Kind of a weird thing going on in the upper right-hand corner for this sticker that went over top of the Boba Fett showing the rocket firing mechanism. There's several different stickers that are out there, but this one seems to have... Excuse me, I just drank a Diet Dr. Pepper. Don't drink Diet Dr. Pepper. That stuff makes you burp like crazy. But this sticker, it looks like it maybe has a little bit of, staining or something like that going on. A little bit of scuffing on the back of the card, but overall pretty nice. You can see some more scuffing on the back there. It seems to me, I'm only speculating, okay? It seems to me that AFA treats scuffing on the back of the card, even when it's fairly pronounced like this. You can look at the card by the Jawa and Ben Kenobi, over by the Death Star droid, over by the Death Squad. There's a lot of scuffing on this back of this card. And it seems to me when the scuffing's on the back of the card, but there's not really much in the way of scuffs, if any at all. I don't see anything on the front. They don't really ding it that bad. The card got an 80 score, blister 85, figure 85, and I think it's, personally, I don't think it's misgraded or anything like that, but I question whether this would still get a card score of 80 if this was a later release card back, like a Return of the Jedi or something like that, Power of the Force. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Whether they would discount the scuffing on one that is earlier like this from 1978 20 back versus if this same amount of scuffing was on a Return of the Jedi card back, would they still give it an 80 sub score for the card? I don't know the answer. I just thought it was worth talking about or speculating. I think personally that they would drop this down to a 75 if the scuffing was like this on a later card back. But, in all fairness, it does show really... the front looks perfect. I don't see anything wrong with it at all. So maybe I'm just being an idiot. Anyway, that one did sell for $1,100. It did sit for a little while, but finally did sell at $1,100. Now let's dig into Toy Scout. Toy Scout's got several different accounts. I think that they work with multiple people and have different locations through the U.S. But this one in Iowa had either some mint in sealed box 12-inch figures, or they were unused contents, but they were open packages. And the flap, unfortunately, for all of them had kind of folded, so he kind of had to pull the flap out to show you what it looked like. But I have no idea how these would grade, given that the flap is completely folded over like that. But it's very nice. They're all very nice. This one did sell for $695. And you can see how the flap has completely been folded over like that. I don't know whether any of the 12-inch figures came out of the factory with the flap folded over like that, similar to what happened with the Wampa. I know that a number of JCPenney Wampas, that flap was factory folded over just to minimize space in the shipping containers, I guess, or the Kenner shipper boxes. I don't know, but anyway, it's just interesting because all of these had folded flaps, and it could have been the original owner of these folded them over for storage purposes, or maybe it happened, at the factory. I don't know. It just seems so perfect in terms of how well they're folded over. Anyway, the Han Solo was mint in sealed box. That one sold for $6.95. The Vader was not mint in sealed box. You can see where they had a tear on the box there, and there's another tear. So this one's been opened before, but still a very nice presentation piece. And that one sold for $5.85. C-3PO was still sealed. And again, you can see how it was, the flap was folded over on that one. That one sold for $4.05. So usually C-3PO doesn't go for that high of a number for whatever reason. But C-3PO tends to be one of the least expensive of the 12-inch line, that and the Jawa. The Stormtrooper is another one that's usually not that expensive. This one was mint, but unused. So it had already been opened before. Unused content. So this would be like a qualified grade type of item. Very, very nice Stormtrooper, though. You can see how white it is. This is one that usually does get yellowing on, especially on the chest area. But you can see it's got that zip tie still around the figure. Very, very nice example. That one sold for $480. They had the Luke Skywalker. This one was, let's see, stunning mint in sealed box. So this one was still sealed. But again, you can see how the flap had been folded over. Long play logo there. But a very nice example. All these were very, very clean, and hence the high prices. $676 on this one. Now, I think that if this had not had a folded flap, you could probably pretty easily double most of these prices, especially for the mint and sealed box examples. The unfolded flap, where the box is kind of still in 80 grade condition, usually over $1,000 for a number of these, especially the Luke. Boba Fett, obviously he's a very expensive one. This one was unused contents as well. You can see it already been opened there, but still tied to the backer. And wow, look how clean that figure is. That is a very, very clean example. That's probably one of the cleanest ones I've seen, although maybe it had a little scuff right there on the front. So the legs were super clean. Very, very nice example though. And that one sold for $817. So, very pricey for Boba Fett, especially in kind of 80 plus grade condition. The Jawa is another one that's not particularly expensive. This one was sealed still, and that one sold for $407. Usually the Jawa and the C-3PO are sort of the least expensive 12-inch figures. But then we get into the big boys. This one was unused contents, but it was the IG-88. I was a little surprised it went as high as it did, but the box for IG-88 is tough to come by, especially in this kind of condition. A mint or near mint condition complete 15-inch IG-88 usually sets you back, I'd say anywhere from on the low end, $600, but usually more like $800 to $900 for just the figure complete. And so this is a good example where people are really paying up for it, despite the flap being folded, despite it already being open. But we looked at one that was a fairly low-grade AFA example. It was like an AFA 60 that sold last year. And it sold for insane money. Now, I know it's a different market environment, but I believe it sold in the 3,000 range, 3,000 or 4,000, somewhere in that ballpark. So it's a very pricey 12-inch figure, easily the most expensive, excluding prototypes and ones that never made it to retail. But, like the Han Hall, things like that. But this is a very nice example, mainly, and I think the price really reflects the fact that the box was in such relatively good condition. It was very, very clean. Then the Toy Scout also did have some mint and sealed box Empire Strikes Back packaging for mini rigs. The MLC3 sold for $211.50, which I thought was a pretty good deal. I mean, any of them with the Empire Strikes Back packaging usually command a little bit of a premium, but that one was a pretty decent deal. The MTV7 is one of the more popular ones. I'm surprised a little bit that this one didn't go higher. The flap was in great shape on this one. So it's weird that the flaps on the mini rigs hadn't been folded, but all of the flaps on the 12-inch figures had been folded. So who knows? Anyway, that one sold for $285, which I thought was actually a pretty good deal. You get this one graded, in high grade for the Empire Strikes Back packaging for the MTV7. I've seen them go $600 to $700 very regularly. So, it's a lot cheaper on the Return of the Jedi packaging, but the Empire Strikes Back packaging, this is one of the more desirable mini rigs, in my opinion, just because it shows the Battle of the Hoth. You could almost picture these vehicles being off screen during the Battle of Hoth. You obviously have the Walkers and the AT-ST in one scene, but maybe just off screen. You can just picture these rolling down the icy tundra, shooting at the laser cannons of the rebels and all the trenches. So very, very cool. It would have come in handy. I think those four-wheelers would have come in handy getting over the trenches and rolling over the bodies. And an interesting thing is I'm rereading Twilight Company, which is a great book, by the way. You got to read that book if you haven't read it already. And there's a scene in there from the Battle of Hoth, and it talks about these particular types of vehicles. They mention them as like off-road kind of vehicles that don't hold many soldiers. There's like 3 or 4 soldiers huddled in one that they stole, trying to get back to the base. So it's interesting. And immediately when I was reading the book the other night, I immediately thought of the MTV7 mini rig. So it really kind of brought the mini rig to life in the book when they had that Battle of Hoth scene for Twilight Company. So I highly recommend that book. You got to read it if you have not. It's a fantastic read. Sorry, a little bit of a digression there. So PDT-8 is another one. This is always a weird one. I always found this mini rig so strange. That one sold for $330.99. So that one clearly is a pretty expensive one. But very, very, very nice looking box on that one. No fold to the flap either on that one. I've got some final mint on cards to wrap things up. This one was a 21 back Han Solo. This one was the large head on the early transition card. So the ESB transition card where only first 21 figures showed. And this was an AFA 80 archival case. Blister looked like it had kind of a weird bump at the top, probably just from his head there. But it was an overall 80. Very, very nice clear blister. Punched example, no price sticker. That one sold for $609, which I thought was a pretty decent deal. And then they also had an AFA 80 41 back D Yoda with the brown snake. So it's hard to find the brown snake Yoda on ESB card backs. And unfortunately, it has yellowed since grading. So you can see there NM for near mint. But usually there's a Y designation when the blister has yellowed. And clearly the blister has yellowed when looking at the blister there. So it's yellowed since grading. But so this label really is no longer applicable given that it has yellowed. But still, very nice example. Unpunched with 2 or 3 price stickers there in the upper right-hand corner. $288 for that one. Was the original price on that. $537 took that one home, $537. But again, hard to find brown snake Yodas on any ESP card back. And if you can find one with a clear blister especially, you're going to be paying a lot more money. Next up was another one that did have the yellow designation. So you can see here, this 41 back B R2-D2 had an archival case. It did mention it was yellowed in the label. So this one is appropriately labeled yellow blister, as you can see there. Punched example, no price sticker. That one sold for $590. So this is kind of when they were getting ready to switch over to the 45 back. I think the 45 back is where they switched over to the R2-D2 sensor scope. So the 41 backs are pretty popular among first 12 R2-D2 solid dome collectors, given that that's kind of the last of the first 12 R2-D2 before they switched over to the sensor scope. Don't quote me on that. I think that's right, the 45 back. Finally, we had a 32 back Luke Skywalker with his looking photo there. And you can see there it's a close-up of Luke. And it was ungraded, but it was in great shape. This was unpunched, no price sticker, 32 back. And I think it's the 32B. 32B, very, very nice example. This might be one I have in my collection. I think mine with the looking photo is a 41A, if memory serves. But that's still a very, very clean example of Luke Bespin. That one sold for $1,500 in a in a buy it now situation. So very expensive to get any Luke Bespin in this kind of condition. I hope you enjoyed this look at recent sales. Please leave me a like. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back soon.